Thank you everyone again for joining our webinar today. My name is Dominic and I work with Amazon's Selling Partner App Store. As you may know, the App Store is a one-stop shop for sellers to discover and enable more than 3,000 trusted third-party apps to help you grow and manage your businesses. We are continuing our webinar series today with a presentation from our software partners Seller Labs on how to maximize growth with data-driven decisions. Throughout this session, we encourage you to submit your questions through the questions tool, and we'll be answering them in a live Q&A session following the presentation. So without further ado, I now give the floor to Brandon.
Thanks, Dominic. It's great to be here today. Happy to be with everybody and grateful to have so many people joining us and hopefully interested in some of the data aspects and how to learn how to use data to grow your business and to become successful there. So just a little bit about myself. My name is Brandon Checketts. I've been selling on Amazon for over 10 years. Really been working as a programmer and working with Amazon data for well over that amount of time. We launched a product called Feedback Genius way back in 2013 or so. Was an early FBA seller and known and been working with many of the Amazon APIs, which are the ways that the computers sort of talk to Amazon services. So we've had a long history of working with Amazon as part of the developer council. And as you know, some of those technical things, those emails you probably ignore about the APIs being changed and all that kind of stuff. Where that's the meat of what we do at a lot of times. So really been working with that kind of data and stuff for over 10 years and got pretty good understanding of how all that stuff works, and happy to share with you how some of those things work and to help so you can optimize your business. So at Seller Labs, our mission statement really is to provide innovative applications of data so that you and your business can build repeatable processes and create technology that will result in increased profits. So we're really interested in helping our customers, our sellers, to succeed, to understand what data drives important key business decisions and helping to use data to make better decisions. And we'll show through quite a few examples of that as we go through our slides today. So, but one of the things, like, it's often hard to get access to data, and so wouldn't it be so easy if you could just generate a profit and loss statement for your products like this? This is what we're going to get in today to show a little bit of the power of this and how this can help you to understand how your business is doing on a month-by-month basis or up to the minute basis, and really make good decisions that can help you to drive your business well. Let's see. One of the things we want to talk about when we're talking about making data-driven decisions is what are those sort of requirements in order to be able to make data-driven decisions. And you know, we kind of think about that in terms of these 4 top-level things. We want to make sure that the data that we have is available so that we can make sure that it's easy to access, so it doesn't cost us a lot of time in order to go and like analyze it. We found that if it takes you a lot of time or a lot of effort to pull down reports, you tend to do it less frequently, and you don't use that data to make good decisions. So having it available is important. We also want it to be accurate, so we know and we trust the numbers that come in through there. With any sort of data, when we're matching data between multiple systems, there's always discrepancies. So we want to make sure that if there are discrepancies, that we understand those. We know some of what's going behind those. And we want to make sure that we minimize them as much as possible. We always, a lot of the data we try to get to the penny whenever possible, but really 2% is kind of our threshold for being within 1 or 2% means you're pretty close. And then we want to make sure that our data is understandable. So it uses terms that we're familiar with, that's not ambiguous. A lot of times you'll see people use the same word for different things or different words that mean the same thing. That can get to be confusing. So we want to make sure that when we're talking about things in our data that we're using the same terms consistently to avoid confusion about those things. And then lastly, when we're talking about data, we want it to be shareable. So we want to be able to not only share the results of it, not more than just a PDF share. We want a lot of the data analyses that we do nowadays are more interactive. So we want to be able to make sure those are shareable. And then not only the results of those are shareable, but like the way in which you produce that is shareable and allow other people to modify it and tweak it. Because what we find is that as you have experts in your organization, they may know more about it than somebody else, and really making it so they can go in and make changes to that and then share those back out with the rest of the team. So we'll talk about that in a number of ways as we go forward here. But at the end of the day, we're really trying to make good decisions. It's going to help us to save time so that we can focus on the things that are more important. We want to make sure that they're extremely accurate so that we're making the best informed decisions that we can. At the end of the day, that's in order to help you as a seller to increase your revenue and increase your profitability. So we're going to talk about the Seller Labs Data Hub, which is a tool that we've built that pulls in data from all the Amazon APIs, all those different data sources that Amazon has, and puts them into Google Sheets, because Google Sheets is a really convenient way to be able to present your data, to sort it, and it really accomplishes all those things we talked about on the last slide about being accessible and understandable and shareable. But before we get into too many details too, I wanted to bring on the line a friend of mine, Rolando from Global Teck. He's been using our product to make informed decisions. And I wanted to bring him on for just a minute. Welcome, Rolando. It's good to see you here today.
Hey, Brandon. Good to see you.
Good. So as we talk about data, just curious about what impact has that made in your business, and what kind of things have you been able to do to make better decisions?
Well, it's made a huge impact. I just actually, before we got on the line, I'll give you a little bit of data. One of the things that we were really looking to do was maximize our ad spend and find golden hours. And since we've implemented some of the changes using this data, our ad spend the last 30 days, or I should say, our organic sales are up 25% in the last 30 days, and sales as a result of ads are up 12%. So we had two questions that we wanted to answer looking at data that you had, because data is like drinking out of a fire hose when you're looking at Amazon. And we wanted a simple way to understand two questions. One, are there golden hours when we get orders on Amazon? The answer is yes, there are golden hours. Question number two, can then we apply our ad spend and allocate it in a way so that we can best utilize those golden hours in that budget? And the answer is yes, there are. And with the other tools that you guys have, like the ad scheduling, we've been able to apply what we learned from this heat map, which is as a result of looking at this data and your team working with us. And what you're looking at on the screen right now is just a sample of some of that data. And what we found is that there are golden hours based on day, there's golden hours based on the month. So now we're able to better utilize the data in a way that we can disseminate that information throughout our organization, because you said earlier, there is a paralysis by analysis. I'm not an expert at stats and rows and columns and pivot tables and all the rest, but something as simple as a green to red indicator showing me the hours of the day, as well as and then you see the columns by the actual day. Our team has been able to implement this, very easy to use. Take that data, make some actions around it, and voila, like the numbers speak for themselves.
Yeah, thank you. So you can see, like, this is a visual way to interpret that data, which the ability to kind of look at it in charts and graphs really helps to visualize it and sort of understand it more intuitively than all these numbers.
Awesome. Thank you, Brandon.
Thanks, Rolando. It's been great to work with you. So this is an example of one of the reports that Rolando's helped us to create, and really kind of shows how you can find when the hot spots are, the golden hours, as you call them, to really optimize and dial in your ad spend, your pricing, however you want to use that in order to make good use of it. So, well, great. Well, we wanted to show, sometimes I feel like when we talk to sellers, they know that all this data is available in all these different places, and they've built some of these processes, but it's really hard to maintain. And so I like this image is kind of like what I feel like sometimes we get in and start having conversations with sellers about how they do certain things, and it feels a bit like this. Would somebody put together a report in this system from here and use data from here, and it's plugged in here, and at one point it was very clean and these colors maybe meant something, but over time it gets to be really messy and kind of hard to follow and understand how one thing affects another thing. And so with the Seller Labs Data Hub, we really tend to think of it more like this, as it's very neat and organized. Everything's labeled and is consistent and even color coded. And so that's really what we're trying to make it, so that when you need to go in and tweak this stuff, when you need to go change something in your business, it's very easy to understand and very easy to be able to change your logic, to add your own logic in there and make better decisions. So these are just some questions we kind of ask as far as like, we don't have a physical representation of this, so ask yourself these questions to see if your data might be kind of a mess and have some opportunity for streamlining it. So if you spend more than five minutes a day, that adds up to 5 days a week, and that's a couple hours a month worth of time if you're spending more than 5 minutes a day doing something. So if you find yourself downloading reports over and over, or copying and pasting information from one screen to another, or paying somebody else to do that kind of thing, that's the kind of stuff that's easy to automate, and it's really easy to use your time in a better way than downloading these reports and making these reports and changing them so frequently. So one of the key things that I mentioned earlier is if you find yourself not running an analysis or not having the data to do it, and then just kind of continuing as the status quo, that's a good sign that your data is kind of not helping you out. at the end of the day, making decisions quickly and accurately is critical to succeeding in the fast-paced world of e-commerce. So one of the times when we get asking people talk to us about things, they ask us like, what are the most important reports or data that I should be looking at? And then if they're looking at some reports, the other most common question we get is, are my numbers any good? And with most things, well, it kind of depends. So that's a vague answer, but the reason we asked our poll earlier is because I wanted to figure out, if you're these different kind of organizations, you might think about these numbers in different ways. So if you're a brand owner, we typically would expect, and it looks like almost like 70+% of people said that they had some aspect of their business was a brand owner. For those products or for those businesses, you'd expect to have a relatively high and consistent gross margin because you're producing the products and making them. You'd expect to spend more money on advertising than in many other business models, especially as you're in the brand growth phase and introducing more products, but you do expect that the revenue to increase your sales in the future. So you're also typically looking at brand growth over time to make sure that your revenue is growing, because that's a large part of the brand is that you hope that people are attracted to your brand and come back over and over again. When we're talking about like forecasting and looking forward, you're usually looking 6 months plus out and figuring out what kind of inventory you need to buy for next season or next year. And so you're kind of looking, sometimes using a little bit of magic, trying to guess what it's like that far in advance. Now, if you're like about 20–30% of our people that responded here, there's some kind of a reseller. Though for those products or for those businesses, you'd expect to have consistent gross margins, and depending how you negotiate with your suppliers, you'd expect to know pretty well what those gross margins are. But you also want to make sure that you have fairly tight controls on advertising and spend to make sure that you're not spending too much money on those, because your margins are less than they would be in other business models. So you really want to pay close attention to revenue and profitability by product, but not only by product. Often we've found a lot of customers that want to pay attention to how is my products from supplier A doing, or my products from vendor B doing, or whatever. So wanted to look at sort of performance of those products in a group rather than sort of in an individual basis and in a more granular detail than at your whole business level. So from a forecasting and looking forward perspective, we're not looking forward quite as far as if you're a brand owner. You typically need to make sure you've got cash flow and enough money to pay for inventory for the next 3 to 4 months there. And looking a large part of what you're trying to be effective at is making the capital that you have efficient. So looking at return on working capital by product there. And then there's a smaller portion, about 20% of people said that they did some kind of reseller, liquidation, or arbitrage business models. For those businesses or product lines, you're expecting to see revenue and profitability, again, not only by product, but also by source, so you can see how efficient you are. But you also want to take care to include returns and refunds in there, because those can be a big eater take away your profitability. So you want to also continue to monitor for a consistent gross margin, so to make sure that when you're buying stuff, you're buying it at the right prices, so that you're not losing money on that, because there's a lot of fees and everything that goes into there you have to make sure and account for. And then you want to make sure your overall inventory is turning, and so you don't keep a lot of stale inventory. As you know, those long-term storage fees are another one that will really eat up your profitability if you keep them in there. So that's a quick overview. Thank you for those that have shared your results for us about your business models, because the way we talk about these reports as we come up here will be somewhat framed by what kind of business model you have. So I wanted to jump into some reports, and right now I know one of the topics that's is pretty hot right now is the cost of advertising. It's increasing a lot. We've seen many people have a year-over-year growth in advertising costs. And if you haven't heard this term before, the term TACoS, it's what we call a total advertising cost of sales. If you're looking at reports on Amazon and the Advertising Center, you'll see ACoS is obviously one that you see everywhere on there. But ACoS looks only at the sales that are directly attributed to your advertising. And so when we talk about TACoS, we're talking about advertising as a percentage of all of our sales, not just the subset of sales that were from advertising. And part of the importance with that is one of the understandings is as you do better at advertising, as you sell more in advertising, you should also sell more organically as well. And the TACoS is sort of a way of measuring your advertising, including those organic sales that you hope or expect to get. So the way you calculate it is actually pretty simple. You just take your total ad spend Again, you can divide that up on an account level basis or a set of products or at an individual product level. You take the amount that you spend on advertising for that and you divide it by the total sales revenue, and you'll see a percentage number. So, but it's kind of important to understand that, to know how much of your profit margin or how much of your gross profit is going into advertising, and you want to make sure and monitor that over time, because that is one of those things where you as a brand owner or as an advertiser, that's one of the easiest knobs or dials for you to change, is the advertising spend. But it's been becoming more and more important to understand that. So we put together one of our reports called a TACoS report that's really makes this very easy to do, and this is possible to download and to create it on your own. So you'd essentially follow these steps. You go into the Amazon Seller Central, you go to the report section, go down to business reports, and you download that sales and traffic report. And then you also have to hop over to the campaign manager and download a campaign report. Make sure you select the same date range in both of those so that they match up. And then you copy and paste those into a spreadsheet. And with some math, you take the advertising spend one and divide it by the total sales, and it will tell you a TACoS number for your whole business. So that's the way you would do this manually. If you wanted to do it for a different time frame, obviously you got to go back and download those reports for different time frames. And if you wanted to do it on a per unit basis or a per SKU basis, you have to go download some different reports. You have to go in the Seller Central or in the business report section. You download the traffic by child ASIN report, because that breaks it down on a per unit or per product basis. And then you have to go download individual reports for product ads, for sponsored products, sponsored brands, and sponsored display, and then find the SKUs that are relevant in there and match them all up. So it's a lot more complicated if you want to do this on a per SKU basis. Fortunately, we've made that pretty easy, I think. So with our available Google Sheets templates, which we'll share later, we'll be able to basically does all that math for us. And you can see our example here is Stark Industries is our fictitious company that we're using. And you can see, revenue. We've got 2 time periods represented here. So the columns on the far left are the products, like the SKU and the ASIN information. The middle columns there with the white header are we've selected May of 2021 in this example, and then the 4 or 5 columns on the right of that is May of 2022. So we can look at a year-over-year analysis of this. And then we've got the TACoS is in the column there, and you can see it's color-coded there. Green is good, meaning it's not gone up by much, and red is worse, meaning that it's on the higher end. So you can use this to sort of figure out, how are my products doing on an ACoS basis for either time period, and then even the far right line columns there, you can see are they up or down on that. So the sheet doesn't do a lot of justice, so we can go in here and click on the time periods here. We can select the different time period here, and then we can do some filtering on it here too. So if we wanted to go in, for instance, and say that our total advertising cost was over 3%, we type that in there and it filters it down. It does it very nicely for you. And if you're looking at hundreds of products, that's a little bit more dramatic than just a few here. And then if we also go over to this page, we can look at if we can select a product or several products, and it will show us a graph of that, how our TACoS has changed over time. So this is getting to be really cool, and so we can look at our products, and really notice I don't have to pull in any information for this. This is literally saving 5 minutes for every time I click here, or at least 5 minutes of downloading reports and stuff for every time I click. So that's a really cool template we have available. The other report that we want to talk about too is our profit and loss by product report. So this one, again, it's possible to go and generate this on Seller Central. If you go to the settlements page under reports, and then you have to go and download a warehouse fees report as a separate report with fees. Amazon doesn't store your cost of goods anywhere, so you'd have data, you'd have your own spreadsheet or your own data with that somewhere else. And then you kind of put all that together in a spreadsheet, and you can come up with some VLOOKUPs and some index functions to do some spreadsheet magic to make those work. And then you can use all that data and put it together into a profit and loss statement. It looks something like this. So this is something like some people have like a QuickBooks or Xero financial things that look at your business as a whole. But what we really wanted to do is enable sellers to look at it on a per product basis, so you can look at it and just look at a selection of products. So again, using our example data here, using our Iron Man suits and our robotic arms, you see we can go and change those products out and see how that looks and how that affects the profitability on one SKU at a time or using multiple SKUs at a time here. So I'll just go in here and select the Iron Man suit, and you'll see it takes a few seconds for it to refresh and then add to it these other products. And you can see within a few seconds all the data refreshes, and I can see profitability for the last year on those products. So it's pretty awesome. Again, this is using data not only from Amazon, but it's pulling in data from your own cost of goods, which might exist in your own spreadsheets or something as well. So the last one I wanted to share here was we call our seasonal sales forecast template. And that really allows you to take past trends that you might have observed as far as seasonality and stuff and project them into the future. So again, this one sort of looks like we're using an Iron Man suit here in an example, and I can go up here and I can select the product and change my date ranges and see it pulls in data from the past 2 years, looks at the seasonal averages for on a month-to-month basis, and then also looks at how I was doing this year compared to last year, and can project forward how many we would expect to sell in the future. It does some extra cool math in there as far as like figuring out of stock and buy box percentages and stuff as well. And it's got lots of little niles and knobs there you can tweak to make sure that it's behaving how you want it to. So that's another template I just wanted to share. Anyway, the point of all these is that making data-driven decisions is a must, not really nowadays, and to be able to succeed and grow in the e-commerce space. So the goal of these tools and having this data at your fingertips is so that you can save time and effort, adjust your strategies with advertising and other things so that you can increase sales, really to ultimately sell more and to drive more profitability for your business. So we're talking about this in terms of the connector that we've made for Google Sheets we call it the Seller Labs Data Hub. And it's basically a Google Sheets add-on. I didn't even know Google Sheets had add-ons until we started doing this, but you can make your own formulas in there. And so it makes it so you can go directly from your seller data into Google Sheets. And we've included a bunch of templates in there, but we also have the building blocks of how to give you the pieces to make your own formulas if you want to do that. So certainly there's going to be some people that are spreadsheet gurus that know how to go in and modify all these things. We've got some really cool tools for you and love to get in touch with you to help build some stuff. But if you just want to use the templates as we have them, like they're awesome as well. And we've got instructions included in all those. So really the idea is to be able to customize these reports to fit your business, your unique business model, because that's how you'll succeed and do better than your competitors. So getting it working is actually pretty simple. You go into Google Sheets. If you go up to the extensions menu up at the top, there's a thing that says add extensions, and you search for Seller Labs in there. You'll see our extension where you click the install button. Once you're installed, it adds this menu option under extensions. So you go up to extensions and go down to here and you can click on create or connect to my account. And then when you do that, it brings up this sidebar on the right side where it prompts you for a token name and a Seller Labs token. That's where you'd hop over to Seller Labs and you'd have to connect your Amazon account and stuff like that to the Seller Labs side. And we make that process as seamless as we can. You eventually end up with a token that you can use that you paste back into here. And then once you've got that pasted into there, it really enables you to go into, well, it turns on all the templates for one thing, but then if you want to go and investigate or add more to it, it turns on, we've got about 58 functions available now that pull in data from different places. So you can see the example I've got here on the screen is the SL raw Amazon traffic function, and it's got parameters you can pass to it that tell it to pull in my US marketplace for data from the last year. And then I want to pull in columns for the child, ASIN, and ordered product sales. It allows you to do filtering and grouping and all kinds of other stuff on there to get out the data that you need. So we're pretty happy with that and pretty proud of it and happy to talk to people more about that. But Seller Labs has been doing this for a long time. We've got other products. You might know us for our messaging tool, our advertising tools, our research tools, and Chrome extensions. And we were just launching a tool for doing customer surveys here in the next month or so. So we've been around for a long time. I've been doing this pretty good at it, I think. So that's I've talked through a ton of stuff right there. So went really quick through that, but happy to answer questions. I've seen a bunch of questions come in. I think, Dominic, you've been paying attention to those as they've come in. So we can go ahead and hop onto those.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Brandon, for the great presentation. I know I learned a lot about all of the different types of reports that you really need in many ways to run a successful business and understand your TACoS and many other data points. We've had a bunch of questions come in so far, and so thank you everyone for submitting those. So we'll start with this one, which is, what kind of advertising data can I access from the Data Hub?
That's a good question. So advertising data is obviously, there's a ton of stuff in there. So we have pretty much, I think, everything you can find in Seller Central, a lot of that. So anything kind of report on campaign reports, campaign performance reports, ad groups, keywords, search term reports. There's all that data is represented in the data that we can get back in the Google Sheets extension. So of those 58 formulas, I think they're probably 30–40% of them are probably all about advertising data that we can pull in there. So there's a lot of functionality that you can pull in there, and as far as managing campaigns and adjusting bids and getting back all that kind of reports. So there's a lot of good stuff available there.
Great. For sellers that have multiple accounts, are they able to connect multiple accounts in one place? Can you maybe talk through that a little bit?
Yeah, certainly. So Seller Labs actually has an agency where we have hundreds of customers, and so we use the same sort of thing on there. So you're able to connect as many accounts. We've got you can connect up multiple accounts from multiple marketplaces. So if you've got multiple Amazon accounts from different ones, you can just connect them in. Again, in Seller Labs Pro, it's pretty easy to go in there. You just click a couple buttons. There's a marketplace connections page there. You click on add, and it's going to ask you what region you're in, and then you go through that typical process of you're probably familiar with it, with connecting the APIs for both the selling partner API and the advertising API, and then you can put them in there. So now when you're actually trying to use multiple different marketplaces in the Google Sheets function, you'll saw the example that I had there had one of the equations where the first argument, I think, said US. And so you're able to put in there, when you're doing the functions, you can group all together your US marketplaces, or you can do them individually if you wanted to do that, or you could do any subset of things together to pull together all the different marketplaces you have there. One thing I guess I'd caution is that when things are in different currencies, you don't want to add those together. So if you're adding pesos with dollars, the numbers don't tend to make any sense. So make sure you're doing like all the same currency together at the same time.
Sure. And you mentioned marketplaces, and several of the questions here revolve around which Amazon marketplaces are supported by Seller Labs.
I would succinctly say all of them, because we basically just our APIs all connect with all the Amazon stuff. I saw an email actually this morning, I think, that Amazon SP, or whoever was it, one of the new Amazon marketplaces in Portugal or something, was launching in advertising. So if the data is available in the API, we pretty much pull it in there. So some of the brand newest ones, I think Egypt is brand new and Poland is brand new. So some of that's, we might have just the selling data and not the advertising data yet, because a lot of them advertising isn't even turned on yet. So it's a little bit limited by what's functionality that's enabled at those brand new marketplaces. But we do connect to all of them and can import data from every Amazon marketplace.
I have a question here from Alexander. Does Seller Labs have the ability to pull in PPC data?
PPC data would be like, so if you're talking about like Amazon PPC data, yes, absolutely. That's the advertising data we're talking about. So anything that we just mentioned there about advertising would be all those campaign stuff. Again, it gets very, very, very granular down to the keyword reports. And so you can see individual keywords that were searched, how frequently you get impressions and clicks and click-through rates and TACoS and ACoS, all those things are in there. So.
Great. And for TACoS, we have a question here from Troy. Does your service allow you to look at TACoS on a week-by-week basis, like say in a line graph? And I guess maybe more broadly, what sorts of graphs and time frames can you work with?
One of the reasons why we use Google Sheets for viewing that is because you can do whatever you want. So you'll see most of the templates that I just demonstrated are on a monthly basis, but we could certainly adjust those, and you can certainly adjust those to be on a weekly basis if you'd like to. So the weekly cadence makes a lot more sense for somebody who's like pretty dynamic like that. So maybe you've got one of those businesses where 1 month at a time is not frequently enough. That certainly is the case. So knowing how some of those things, like your revenue is doing week over week, or your TACoS is doing, or your ad spend is doing on a week-to-week basis would be useful. And certainly there's ways to do that. So some of the functionality we have in there, it allows you to group it by week. So we tend to use month because that's pretty widely understood. But we can certainly, or you can certainly just go in and, so what we provide is templates, I guess, in Google Sheets. So you make a copy of the template we provide, and then you can change the formulas to do it by week if you want to, or you can have third parties, you can find contractors and stuff that will do that as well. if you're not a Google Sheets fan or know the details about that, it certainly is something that's not hard to find people to do as well.
Absolutely. I have a question here from Alex. If you started today with Data Hub, how far back would it pull the data from?
That's a great question. Thanks, Alex. It depends on the data we're talking about, so it gets a little bit tricky, but I guess advertising data is just different than most of the rest of the data. So Amazon's got limits on how far data certain things go back. But in general, I would say with most of the data, we are able to pull in, and our policy is to pull in 3 years plus the current year's worth of data. So we go back as far as we can that the Amazon data allows us. So we pull in, for example, today's the early in 2023. So we have data in our database from 2020, 2021, 2022, plus the current year. So 3 years worth of data plus the current year for that. And then we keep that data for as long as you remain a customer. So the advertising data is a little bit different though. So the advertising data, the data you can get out of Amazon only goes back 60 or 90 days, I think, depending on the data that you're talking about. So after 60 or 90 days, you can't get it anymore. So that's one of the reasons I'd actually encourage you to sign up today, because 60 days back from today is still sort of the middle of Q4. So if you start signing up today and start accumulating your data, you'll have your advertising data for when you might want it looking forward next year at this time, or in the middle of looking forward into Q4 in 6 months from now or whatever. So the advertising data specifically kind of is extra useful because we store it again for as long as you remain a customer, and that's not available, especially on as granular basis as we have it once we've ingested it and put it in our database. So certainly sign up early and keep it available so that you can use it in the future.
Great. I have a question here. Does your tool allow pulling sales and inventory data?
Yep, we have a ton of so sales data. We have all the individual orders that were placed. So we don't get like addresses and stuff because that's personally identifiable information. So we don't store customer names or addresses, but I think zip codes, cities, and states are in there. So we have some customers that have made tools that like plots on a map, like where their orders are taking place by zip code. And people have found some interesting trends on that about things being ordered in certain areas of the country at certain times of the year. If you're selling, I don't know, beachwear or something, you might find trends along the coasts, for instance, or something like that. Maybe stuff you might intuitively know, but it's nice to have the data to back that up. So order data, we get in all that kind of stuff, and there's different views of that depending on how you want to look at it. And then for the inventory data you suggested, man, there's probably 5 or 6 data reports we ingest having to do with inventory. So we download inventory data every day. So we've always got a current snapshot of what your inventory is. And then we pull in those inventory health reports, the inventory aging reports, and probably 3 or 4 more that I'm not thinking of right now, that help you understand like how long your products has been in stock, what's your sell-through rate. Like there's a ton of data that's available in there. And this is probably a good opportunity, Dominic, to mention, like we do have we call it our data dictionary that describes all the data that's available, every data point that we have in there. So if you go to that link at the bottom, the sellerlabs.com/webinar, there's a link, I believe, for our data dictionary on there. Or if you use any of our templates, there's a link to the data dictionary on that right sidebar when it comes up, because that can be useful for looking at it. But like I said, there's quite a bit of data available, and we pull it all in.
Fantastic. Have several questions around the pricing model for your service. Could you maybe walk us through how that works?
We have 2 kind of models here. So one of them is for individual sellers. So if you're an individual seller, that includes sellers who might have multiple Amazon accounts, multiple Amazon marketplaces connected. Our pricing scales based on your annual sales revenue. So it starts at $50 and goes up to $299 per month for individual sellers. And then if you're an agency that wants to use this on behalf of your customers to accumulate data so that you can make your own reports, we got a different pricing model at that starts at $300 a month, and it allows you to add customers incrementally. So useful for both types of, if you're an individual seller, there's a model for you. If you're more like an agency where you're doing stuff on behalf of multiple sellers, we've got a model there that works for you.
Fantastic. Are you able to track the returns with respect to sales and how many times a particular unit is being returned?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a report on Amazon for that. It's like an FBA returns report, and there's also a merchant fulfilled returns report. We're pulling in both of those. And so we get in the details with that. There's actually quite a bit of detail. There's like customer comments as far as why things were returned on some of them. So there's some actually interesting, really nuggets of information you can pull out of there too, if you can parse through those and read through them. And then when we talk about returns, we often also think about refunds also. So returns and refunds are a lot of times thought about the same, like similarly, but they're kind of distinct events. And so we do, from a refund perspective, we pull in the full transactions reports that come from Amazon. And so we've got all that financial data as far as refund amounts and by A to Z claims and all the other things, and chargebacks, all those other kind of things that are sort of more in the financial realm of returns or refunds.
Great. I have a question here from Pete about which browsers would you recommend using for Seller Labs? Are there any that you would prefer over others, just to make sure that you have the full functionality?
I believe Chrome is probably the most widely used, that we actually see by far the most. I would say 80+% of people use Chrome. I believe if you're on a Mac, Safari is pretty well supported as well, but Chrome actually works across every operating system and stuff. So I think in general, Chrome is kind of the winner across the internet right now. So
great. Let's see. I have a question here. How long do you keep your data?
Yeah, that's a good question too. So that's one where we do keep data for 3 years plus the current year. So like I said, right now is early 2023. So we have, if you go in our database right now, if you've been a customer, we would have data from 2020, 2021, 2022, complete calendar years there, as well as the current 2023 year to date. So by the end of the year, it'll be about 4 years worth of data, which is actually kind of interesting because we actually have some customers that are like, with all the COVID stuff that went on, like some of them are going back to their 2019 data when we have it available, because 2021 and there's been some really wild stuff kind of happening with stuff over the last couple of years. So we keep it far enough back where I think you could find it useful in any case.
Makes sense. Got a question here from Brooke. How do I use this data to optimize images, product listings?
So there's a number of things we can do. I think we do have stuff like session. So we pull in that traffic report on Amazon under the business reports. It tells you conversion rates and stuff like that. So we can use data there to look at conversion rate over time. But one of the things I think you're getting at there is that I know one of the bullet points we talked about on this webinar was how to optimize listings. And for this purpose of focus, we had some slides in here. We're going to talk about a separate tool we have called Quantify, but we actually chose to not talk about that as much during this one because it got to be a little bit too distracting. So certainly go to sellerlabs.com and put in your email address there, and we'll have a separate webinar about that one. But we didn't want to get too distracted on this one because there was already so much to talk about and to get through. So
yeah, definitely get the feeling that you guys offer so many different things that are so useful to sellers that we could probably have a 3-hour webinar and not cover all of it.
Yeah, there's so much going on that you have to. There's a lot of things that it takes with everything that it takes to run a successful account now.
Are you able to configure actions inside of Seller Labs? This is a question from Nadeem about maybe like turning an ad campaign on or off or bid higher or lower.
So with the Data Hub product that we're talking about mostly here, no, but that is a feature of some other functionality inside Seller Labs. So we do have, we call it our day parting feature, where you can go in and on a campaign level, you can turn on campaigns on and off on a per hour basis. So you can say, just like Rolando talked about earlier in our thing, he said that the golden hours were, with this block of time, or maybe think about it more like a blackout hours, like don't advertise during these times. So we have some functionality in there where it basically shows you a big grid of 7 days across and 24 hours down, and you can check the boxes where you want to turn your campaigns on.
That's an awesome feature, by the way. Love it.
Thanks, Rolando.
Do you have data for product reviews?
We do not currently have data for product reviews in our Data Hub, so that one's not available. But we're looking at how we can obtain that. So one of the things that I would suggest, if there's data points that you're interested in, certainly let us know. We actually have a little website where we keep track of feature requests. So if you go to Seller Labs, or if you're logged into the product, there's a button at the top that says request features or something like that. And if you click on that one, there's a website over there where you can say, I would like to have product reviews in there, and you can put a short description in it, and then encourage your friends to go vote for it, and that kind of helps us dictate what are the most important things for us to be working on and pulling in data for.
That's great. I have a few questions here about the heat map and the golden hour, so to speak. Was the green good or was the red good?
We usually say green is good, red is bad. Kind of like a stoplight in the U.S. Green means go, red means stop. And so I think in several of our templates we kind of use that gradient. So there's like a deep green and a deep red, and there's kind of like an in between too. So the deeper green it is, the better it is, and the deeper red it is, the worse it is.
Fantastic. I just want to thank you so much for your presentation today and sharing your knowledge on how to maximize growth with data-driven decisions.